So, Dash, could you just introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about yourself for people watching this and wanting to know a little bit more about what you do?
Definitely. I am a paranormal investigator. I'm an award-winning paranormal investigator. That's never not going to be funny to me.
Hell yeah.
I'm also an award-winning TTRPG writer. That one doesn't come up as much, but that's in there too. We
Oh,
got
that's so
these are
cool.
the
Really?
two these are the two things in which my I have been recognized. Yeah, I contributed um on a recent Paizo Pathfinder book. It was the Tian Sha World Guide, and I got to make a monster, and I got to design how ritual magic works in the setting. It was very fun. Um, yeah, I'm
That's so
a
cool. Anyway.
I'm a mixed race, non-binary person, and I've sort of been doing just different kinds of writing and performing for basically my entire adult life. And I like going places where it's spooky and seeing what happens.
Hell yeah. So, how did you fall into paranormal investigating? Like,
Yeah.
how did you stumble into that?
So I've been a fan of like the genre for a very long time of just like watching the ghost shows.
Yep.
I've liked watching silly jump scare. We hit a production assistant behind a thing to slam a door stuff. Or not saying that's any specific shows, but a lot of doors do get slammed on a lot of these shows. Also, the water gets turned on, and I think that's very funny because it's very clearly just like a thing that you can do to be like, well,
I
something has
know.
changed. The water is
And like
on.
easy, like, oh, fishing line, you can pull it and you can
Yeah.
tell. Like, so obviously ghosts have a lot of really hate doors and really have a thing for leaky faucet.
Yeah, well, it's because a lot of they died with dirty hands, but they can't wash them. So I like the genre.
Yeah.
And but it always sort of I think the sort of the spectacle of it and the sort of the staged and sort of kayfabe production element of it, I had always sort of classified it as a very specific type of media and not something that I
Yeah.
wanted to like do or participate in.
Yeah.
Um, and after once the pandemic started, I had been doing stand-up comedy for a little over a decade. I used to tour all over,
Oh.
and but I was
Oh
already sort of
boy.
feeling burned out on just sort of the industry and just a lot of elements of it.
That's a lot of work too. Stand-up comedy is a grind. Like the amount of if you
Yes.
want to be successful, like you're
Yeah.
traveling most of the year to like weird clubs and stuff. Like I just feel like it's not, and you're not, it's
Yeah.
like not a glamorous life. It is a grind.
I think for me too, mostly what it was just watching, watching people get up and say just heinous things about trans people and then be rewarded with millions and millions of dollars for that, and not even jokes, just like mean
Just
things.
like terrible statements that
Yeah.
people laugh at, and you're like, that's not even a joke. That's just
Yeah.
transphobia. Like that's just hate speech.
And
Anyway.
so, yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it ended up being sort of a lot of it is hate speech. And there's definitely people who are in stand-up who are doing a good job trying to like make it into something better. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
I just had this moment where I was like, all right, this doesn't feel like my home anymore. This doesn't really feel like
Yeah.
the thing that I want to do. And I had started watching sort of ghost shows again once sort of, pandemic started. You're figuring out a lot of it is just being at home, figuring out
Yeah.
how to occupy your time. And I was like, you know what? I've been a fan of this for a really long time, and I have sort of described I feel like a lot of my life has been like weird magical things happening at me that I didn't really sort of instigate or take part in a really direct way. And so I just had this moment where I was like, I think that if there's so many things that feel like the world is ending, I just kind of want to do a thing that brings me joy and feels weird and interesting and fun. And I would like to try to get out and do ghost stuff. And so at first it was just
Heck
me and a
yeah.
couple of friends, and we went out and just found some cool spots near where I am in New England, and
Oh, easy in New
a
England.
lot
I
of
feel
stuff
like
out
you have to
here.
go outside and just be like an
Yeah.
EVP outside. You're
No,
like,
but
there's just like literally there's just
literally.
ghosts everywhere.
Well,
So you're in a good spot.
and also when you start getting into when you start getting into some of the ideas of like what are you actually talking to? Like is it ghosts?
Yeah.
Is it abstract concepts? Is it just sort of a greater idea of magic? we've done, I don't know if you're familiar with Big Night. I don't know if you know about Big Night. It's an amphibian thing. The first warm, rainy night of the year is what's called Big Night. And if you live near vernal pools and you go out during the first warm, rainy night, you'll see all sorts of cool amphibians making their little trek from their vernal pools to ponds and stuff to lay eggs. And so you go out and you can see salamanders and frogs. And we were trying to decide between two different locations. There were like two locations. We're like, all right, one of these is going to be the one we go to, and we are like, all right, well, let's go in the yard and do an Estes session and just kind of talk to amphibians conceptually.
Oh,
And we did, and we asked a bunch of questions, and we asked them where to go, and we went and we saw for the first time ever yellow spotted salamanders, which was the thing that we wanted to see to begin with. So, there's a lot of like,
that's magic.
it's
Wait, that's
magic.
so cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
beautiful.
there's a lot
And
of
the
stuff
Estes
like
session
that.
is when someone has the headphones on, right?
That's
And
right.
then you're listening to, is it radio? Like, can you radio
Totally. So
static
it
kind
is
of?
named after Estes Park, Colorado, which is where
Yes.
the Stanley Hotel is located. That's the hotel that the Shining Overlook Hotel is based off of. And Carl Pfeiffer and Connor Randall, who a lot of people know from Hellier, they were part of the in-house ghost hunting team for the Stanley
I want
Hotel.
to be an
Oh
in-house
yeah,
ghost
so
hunter for
bad.
a
It'd be
hotel.
so
What the
cool. It'd be so cool. Yeah. And so they sort of pioneered this method. A lot of people use a spirit box. It's a little box that clicks through radio frequencies, and you can put it on
That's right.
FM, you
Okay.
can put it on AM, you can sort of adjust the speed. But the issue, and you see this in a lot of ghost shows, is the confirmation bias, right? Where like if you ask a question and you're hearing the thing coming in, your brain is gonna put together
The like
an
the
answer.
pattern, and you're gonna
This
yeah.
happens with EVPs too a lot in a very delightful way. Like there's a show that I like where they're like, "Oh, do you hear that?" And it's like, "Brr, brr, brr, brr." And like it clearly said, "I'm a demon." And you're like, I guess it said that. Did it say
You're
that?"
like, sure. And now that they say it, you're like, well, yeah, it definitely said
And
I'm
they
a
put
demon. Like,
subtitles on it too to be like, "That's what it said for sure." And
mm,
so the Estes method tries to get around that by just having one person in isolation headphones, so they are the only person who can hear the box, and they also can't hear anyone asking questions. So we do
yeah.
this in the pilot. We have some really cool, a very cool session where we do that in the pilot, and then we also it was very excited for me getting to do that with Ray Wise was also a lot of fun. He got into it. It was very exciting.
Like, okay, I want to hear about, okay, so
Yeah.
Liminal is your show,
Yes.
is it? And it
Yes.
is on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. Yeah. We tried for a little while. People were like, "Oh, you have to sell it. You have to figure out a network." And I'm not saying, if someone offered me a bunch of money, I would definitely consider it for sure because money is the in this capitalist hellscape we live, you sort of need it to be able to make things and do things and
As
also
much as
eat.
we don't want it to be that way,
Yeah,
sadly.
no, it would be sick if the stuff that humans needed to survive were not behind a paywall, but as it stands, not a great system. Someone should do something about it. Um, but yeah, so it's on YouTube. One of the things about it though is like, I'm watching all sorts of cool queer and trans media get picked up and then canceled immediately. Just sort of, and I was just talking to someone else about this, but like our stories are allowed to sell as long as they serve empire, as long as our story is making a big corporation look maybe a little bit more progressive, or as long as it's
Checking off a
making.
box.
Yeah, and part of that too is that if the tides shift and they decide, oh, we actually don't need this anymore, we don't want this anymore for any number of reasons, they can just pull the plug. And one of the things for me is, it's a little bit harder to self-produce. We did a crowdfund for episode 2, which was successful, so we're going to be going out and shooting that in January. We're shooting it in North Carolina, which still needs a lot of help. I'd recommend anyone, find a mutual aid, find some people on the ground
Yeah.
who are needing the help and help out. Um, we decided self-production was a little bit of, to sort of keep control of what we're doing
Yeah.
and not get the rug pulled out from under us if someone decides like, oh, we actually don't
And
want
you
this show
own it.
anymore. That's
So if
yeah.
something happens, I mean, you have control over where it goes. So
Yeah.
that's huge. So tell me about this Ray Wise episode. You
Yeah.
got to hang out with Ray Wise, and
Yes.
y'all, Ray Wise is the coolest. He is in Twin Peaks. He is
Yeah.
in so much stuff, and I am obsessed that you got to do an investigation with him. So tell me about it.
So he's first of all, he's so cool. He's such a cool guy.
Love that too. Makes me so
He's
happy.
been yeah, cool and chill with queer and trans people since a lot longer than a lot of people in Hollywood. Um yeah, which is awesome. And his daughter is a dear friend of mine. I actually was friends
Oh,
with her
that's so
before I knew who her dad was, and I was just just my friend Kaina, and then at some point, I forget she was talking to a different friend, and I was like, oh, that okay, no, I went to a show. I was because we all met in performing in San Francisco doing different comedy things, and
cool.
we had performed. Me and Kaina were performing, and our mutual friend Frankie, who does some producing and research work for Liminal as well. Um, his birthday party, like his 30th birthday party, and Kaina was like, "Oh, I'll get my dad to come in and like do a thing with it." And I was like, "Oh, I know who your dad is. Like it's that guy who's been in everything." And yeah, which was a very very fun silly moment. But kind of had been texting me and she was like, "Oh yeah, my dad keeps buying REM pods." And I was like, why is your dad buying REM? A REM pod is a little puck. You'll see him on a lot of ghost shows. It's a little puck with an antenna, and it makes a
Oh,
terrible
yes.
noise. Yeah,
Yes, 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 yes,
it
yes.
makes a
Okay,
bad noise that
rewise,
is
just buying REM pods.
just buying
Okay,
REM pods. And I was like, why
cool.
is your dad buying REM pods? And she's like, oh well, he thinks my apartment is haunted. And I was like, does he want us to like look into it? And she asked him and he was like, let's do it. And so we got the plane tickets, flew to Los Angeles, and did this investigation
I'm
with Ray
so
Wise.
happy that he was just like, your apartment is haunted and I am buying my own ghost equipment
I
to
need to look
investigate it
into this.
because I'm the daddest dad to ever dad. Wait, that's beautiful.
Well, and he's also so he's a long-term like he's got a lot of cool like spiritual and sort of paranormal stuff that he's been into for a while. Like he brought REM pods, he brought a different sound recorder, he brought his own little his little like EMF detector. He brought all this, so he's got this stuff, he's been into it for a long
He
time.
had a kit. He
He
was
had a kit.
ready.
He was
Oh, that's
absolutely
so
ready.
cool.
It was a lot of
That's
fun.
so nice because I feel like people, I don't know, it like I feel like ghost hunting shows to a degree have kind of like become a bit of a joke
Yes.
as you mentioned,
Yeah.
and it's just nice to have people who take it seriously because like you're taking it seriously, and it's nice to like find someone like him who is on the same wavelength as you and enjoying it and like I don't know, it's nice. It's just got to be nice, just like as a person who does this and like is trying to make something out of it. It's got to be so nice and refreshing.
It's cool to sort of to be able to it's cool to be able to get out there and do something that is ultimately kind of silly, right? It's a silly thing we're doing. We're getting out and saying let's try to poke at something that is sort of by definition unprovable and immeasurable and just see what we can do. And I love that. I love that about it. I my least favorite thing is when they try to like make it into a hard science because it's not. It's like by definition it's not. It's vibes. It's weird
It's like I know
energy.
we're just like playing with energy waves and like
Yeah,
using little mechanical things to maybe see if there's something here. We don't know what it is, but it seems to be chatting with us. So like let's just see what
definitely.
happens. It's got I love that.
And it's cool to find people who are like, yeah, let's do it that way. We don't have to make it a whole jump scare spectacle. I will say though, that does make it so every time we're traveling to investigate, especially if we're filming, I have this moment where I'm like, I really hope something spooky happens. Like I hope something spooky happens so bad because if it doesn't, I'm not gonna fake one. So I really
I
hope
that
every
is hard where
time.
you're just like, oh God, I really hope something we at least something bizarre or
Yeah.
like kind of cool that you can because that is true. Like you don't know. You never know. You can't
And
like make
so
it
far,
happen. I mean, I guess you could. I
exactly.
don't know. I don't know. I have healthy enough fear of this stuff that I'm like, I'm not
Okay.
playing games with this stuff. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I'm curious, like, what have been some of your like a really memorable experience that you've had
Yeah.
doing this on this journey?
Definitely. So with regard to the show, I would say, the culmination of the pilot episode, we have a really sort of genuinely scary encounter with some wildlife. We have a very scary encounter with a pair of copperhead snakes. That yeah, no, it was very and they acted like snakes don't act, which was also wild. And there was just it felt very magical. It felt very like present. So that obviously that one was very memorable. I also I talked to Frankie who does producing stuff, and I was like, this is how the sort of the thing ends. Like we have this crazy experience with snakes, and he's like, that's great because like a lot of people don't believe in ghosts, but certainly everyone believes in snakes. So it is sort of that is verifiable a thing that happened. Um, on the lead up to it, we've had some really wild ones too. We were I went to New York. This was before we shot. I went to New York to celebrate my friend's birthday, and they were like, I want to go do a paranormal investigation thing. I was like, yeah, let's do it. We'll go do one for fun. And we were both picking out different locations, and they were like, there's a spot in the East Village that's haunted by flappers. It's like a haunted speakeasy. And I was like, great, that sounds cool. I was like, I know this one from John Keel talks about it in Mothman Prophecies. It's this place where the author who wrote, or one of the authors who worked on The Shadow, the pulp comic, was living when he wrote it. And John Keel's like, this guy is psychic, and so his psychic energy created a tulpa of a fictional character there. And I was like, oh, that would be really cool too. And so we start looking up the
What's that
Flappers
part of the
place.
Mothman prophecy? I must have just
Yeah,
completely skimmed over
there's
that
so
part.
much in
Holy
there.
shit, that book is
There's
nuts.
and they
Anyway,
left that out of the Richard Gere one. Um, you know, the only problem with that film. And so me and my friend are looking up the Flappers spot, and we find the website for it, and at the very it's going through like, oh, this place used to be a speakeasy, and the actor who played Howdy Doody lived there. And then at the very end of the website, it's like, and this is where, oh, what's his name, Walter Gibson was living when he worked on The Shadow. And so we realized we had been talking about the same spot without realizing it, which is wild because again, it's New York. It's not like there's
it's
only
New
one haunted spot.
York. That's
There's
what I say.
infinity
Like it's
haunted
a
spots. Yeah. And so we're like, well, we gotta go there now because we've had this crazy synchronicity of like accidentally talking
yes.
about the same spot. And so we go there. We're setting up all our gear. We're doing it from the street because like it's like we can't tell who owns it, and it's like super super locked, like under construction. So we're like, all right, we'll just like sort of be on
Oh,
the
okay,
property,
okay, yeah,
do
yeah,
our
yeah.
best outside. While we're setting up, a ghost tour goes by, which is also very funny because it's like, hey, we're doing it. We're not part of the tour. We're just like, yeah,
We're
we're
just
also
like paranormal investigators, just having a good time, just for
just kind
fun.
of doing
Happy
it for
birthday!
funsies. Happy birthday. And this person had tagged along who I knew from Tinder, and they they were like, oh, I want to try the Estes thing, and so they plug in, and they don't know anything about the show, they don't know anything about our plans.
Okay.
The stuff that starts coming through when they're plugged in, it mentions the names of people of my friends who I'm staying with in Memphis, like on the Tennessee trip down to shoot the pilot, the day of the week that we're gonna start shooting, something about like a day in the future making content. Just starts mentioning specific things like from the shoot schedule to come, like down the road. And it was a very clear moment of like, no, for sure, like this is correct. Like we're this is the path. We are sort of being given very obvious signs that we're walking down towards something correct. And I think that one feels very, very memorable to me just
That's
because like,
beautiful.
yeah, because it was pointing us to be like, yeah, your show that you're gonna go do it. That makes sense.
That's so nice. Thanks, universe. Thank you,
Yeah.
whatever is going on here, for confirming and making it. Well, I have a broader question for you
Okay.
because I'm a queer person. I
Yeah.
love the paranormal. I love
Yeah.
cryptids. I love everything. What do you think? Is there a connection, do you think, between the queer community and the paranormal? Like, why do we gravitate? Is that something that you've like thought about a lot yourself in doing this? Because
Yeah.
I feel like us queers just love the weird. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to hear from you, like kind of your experience with that and why you yourself have a theory about that.
Definitely. I think it's twofold. I think it's twofold. And this is sort of the thesis of the show. This is sort of the thesis of
Yeah.
Liminal is that we are intrinsically connected to it. And so it's twofold. I think on the surface, I think we are inherently sympathetic to feelings of being othered. I think when we see, queerness and like the villainous and the monstrous has been connected for so long. If you look at Scar in The Lion King, right? Like this is effete. This is an effete, slender lion with giant arched eyebrows trying to destroy the nuclear family. Or if you look at
Ursula is a drag
Ursula,
queen.
absolutely, exactly. And so
Yeah.
I think there's something to the monstrous and feeling, we all, I think, sympathize extra with Frankenstein, right? This idea of being misunderstood, cast as villainous, cast as dangerous, cast as scary. And I think on a very surface level, it makes sense for us to connect. I mean, there's a reason you see there's in every Palestinian solidarity action I've been in, there's a huge queer contingent. There are queer
Yeah.
pride flags because I
Hmm.
think to be oppressed is to, or at least it should be, to want to stand up for everyone who is oppressed. Nobody's free
Yeah,
until all of us are free, and all of that.
absolutely.
I think that on like a metaphysical level, I I think that there is sort of an inherent connection, and I don't, I never want to be the person who's pointing to other cultures and being like, "See, this proves my thesis or point." I will
Yeah.
say there are many pre-colonial societies that accepted and sort of welcomed genders outside of the gender binary, and in many of those, these people who existed outside of the gender binary were seen as magical. I will say even in my own culture, and I was researching. I didn't find this out until after I shot the show. I should have done more research, but it's very hard to find a lot of hard details about Korean folk magic, just because the sort of the again the cruel fist of Western imperialism has turned half of that country Christian, which is very depressing. But even before that, like a lot of there have been moments of Buddhism and Confucianism, but to get like to the old, like what were the Korean people of Korea sort of before all that practicing, and there is a shamanistic practice called Mu. And hilariously enough now, the practitioners were called Mudang, which is very close to Mudang, everybody's favorite internet hippo, which, and hey, you know what? I think the hippo's magical, so that's okay. But I'm
Synchronicity. Anyway.
yeah. Um, but Mudang were it was a female role. So it was shamans they were chosen by spirits. They had to go through a spiritual sickness, and then they sort of get initiated by another Mudang. But and there is a oh, I have to find this person's name. I have it written down somewhere. I can send it to you, and it could be in notes or
Yeah.
whatever. There was a specific type of udon called a baksu udon, which was someone who was assigned male who dressed in the sort of the traditional female uh, clothes of the mudang and was a mudang practitioner. And one of the things that the person whose work I am thinking of and failing to remember the name of was that there isn't enough evidence to say whether or not a Baksumudang like lived as female outside of just this role and occupied this role only during the practice, or whether they were living that way
Oh,
entirely. But I think that there is something to the idea that what we perceive as a binary, when people exist in a way that transgresses that or crosses that or exists outside of that, there have been many cultures around the world who see that as inherently magical, as inherently spiritual, and as inherently sort of connected to something bigger and strange. And so I think that that connection is very much real, and I think that that connection very much continues to exist. People in the strange talk a lot about liminal spaces, hence the name of the show. But liminal spaces and the idea of sort of being in flux, being sort of in a state of change or having changed, and how that is sort of like a real attractor for the strange and the paranormal. And so I think that there is something to the idea of having a liminal identity or a marginal identity and being sort of inherently and intrinsically connected to magic.
oh yeah. This has been so lovely. Thank you so much for chatting with me about liminal and paranormal and magic. This has been amazing. And so everyone can support by watching liminal on YouTube. They can follow you on TikTok. I already do. So and that where else can people support you? And obviously
Um,
this will be below too, but where else can
totally.
people support you?
Yeah, we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we're on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/at Team Liminal. They make you put the at in there, which I think is silly. I long for yeah, if you're making a YouTube channel now, you gotta put an at in there. They won't just let you have the thing.
Oh, weird.
This is my old person complaint, is just there's no reason for it. It makes the URL very ugly. I dislike it. Um I probably have other old person complaints. That's the big one though.
That's the big one. No, no, I honestly, same.
But yeah, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok are the main places to find us, and liminaltv.com is our website, and people can find links to all of our stuff there.
Hell yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was very nice to chat.